My husband's ex-girlfriend crashed our baby shower with a paternity test envelope. "The baby isn't yours," she whispered to him. I smiled and pulled out the real results, proving my baby was his, and the child she'd claimed was his for years belonged to his brother. "The baby isn't yours." 4 words. 4 simple words whispered into my husband's ear brought our perfect world crashing down in an instant. I watched Mark's face transform from confusion to horror as Vanessa leaned back with a triumphant smile, patting the manila envelope in her hands. All around us, our baby shower guests continued chatting, crystal flutes of non-alcoholic champagne glinting in the afternoon light streaming through our Beacon Hill brownstone windows. No one had noticed yet, but they would soon. Before we begin, I want to thank you all for joining our community. If you enjoy stories of women uncovering painful truths and standing their ground, please subscribe. It's free. Today's story shows what happens when a baby shower becomes the perfect setting for exposing years of family deception. Let's dive in. I'd spent weeks planning this celebration. The pale blue hydrangeas perfectly matched the hand-folded origami storks suspended from our ceiling. As marketing director at Meridian Consulting, I'd orchestrated campaigns worth millions. But this shower for our miracle baby meant more than any corporate success. After 2 miscarriages, this pregnancy had been our salvation. "Emma," Mark called across the living room, his voice strangled. Heads turned. The cheerful conversation dimmed like someone had slowly twisted a volume knob. That's when I noticed David, Mark's brother, nearly drop his drink. His wife Claire grabbed his arm with fingers that whitened at the knuckles. Their reaction wasn't surprise. It was fear. Mark's eyes found mine, pleading across the room filled with our closest friends and family. I smoothed my maternity dress over my 7-month belly and crossed the room with measured steps. "Vanessa was just leaving," I said calmly, extending my hand toward the door. Vanessa tossed her sleek black hair, same style she'd worn for a decade, though her roots needed touching up. "Not before everyone hears the truth about your precious baby, Emma." Her voice carried across the now silent room. "And the truth about Mark." My mother-in-law gasped. My own mother stepped forward protectively, but I simply smiled. "You know what, Vanessa? You're right. Everyone should hear the truth today." Confusion flickered across her perfect features. This wasn't the script she'd rehearsed. I wasn't supposed to agree with her. 3 months ago, I was working late using Mark's laptop when an email notification appeared. I explained, addressing our stunned guests while reaching for my purse on the side table. The subject line caught my attention. "He needs to keep paying." Curious, I opened it. David shifted uncomfortably across the room. Claire's lips pressed into a thin white line. The email was from Vanessa, but oddly it was addressed to David, not Mark. I continued. It contained details about money transfers and mentioned keeping the paternity arrangement quiet. Naturally, I was concerned. Vanessa's confidence visibly faltered. "You're making this up." "Am I?" I pulled out a folder of my own. "Would you like me to read the emails aloud?" "I have copies." I flashed back to that night of discovery, sitting alone in our darkened home office, my hand trembling over the mouse, following the email chain backward through time. Years of deception unfolded before me. Years of Vanessa and David conspiring, using a child as leverage. "When Mark and I met at that hospital fundraiser, you'd been telling him for 2 years that your son was his," I said directly to Vanessa. "Remember? Mark was finishing his surgical residency. I was handling the hospital's rebranding campaign." Mark moved beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. "Emma, what's happening?" "That night, you mentioned how your ex still claimed you had a child together though you weren't convinced," I reminded him gently. "You'd been paying child support because you believed it was the right thing to do even without proof." Vanessa stepped forward, desperation replacing her earlier confidence. "Open the envelope, Mark. The test proves this baby isn't yours." Mark's parents moved closer, his father's face darkening with anger. "Young lady, this is completely inappropriate." "It's all right, George," I interrupted my father-in-law. "Actually, Mark, you should open her envelope." With shaking hands, Mark tore open the manila package and pulled out a document. His eyes scanned the page, brow furrowing deeper. This can't be right," he muttered. "Let me guess," I said, opening my own folder. "It shows you're not the father of our baby, right?" Strange, because I have the actual results right here, authenticated this morning by 2 independent labs. I handed him the real results. Our baby is definitely yours, Mark. His eyes filled with tears of relief. But that's not all I discovered, I continued, pulling out another document. While investigating Vanessa's claims, I had another test run. The room held its collective breath. Vanessa, your son, the one you've claimed is Mark's for 7 years, the one my husband has dutifully supported, is actually David's child. The crystal champagne flute slipped from Claire's fingers, shattering on our hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. David's face drained of color. That's impossible. Is it? I asked quietly. The affair started before you married Claire, before Vanessa even broke up with Mark. The timeline matches perfectly. Vanessa lunged for my folder, but Mark stepped between us. Is this true? He demanded, addressing both his brother and ex-girlfriend. The silence was answer enough. My mother quickly ushered most guests toward the door, murmuring apologies and promises of explanation later. Only family remained in the wreckage of our celebration. You've been lying to me for 7 years, Mark said to Vanessa, his voice hollow. Making me believe I had a son, taking my money. And you, he turned to David, my own brother. David's eyes couldn't meet his. Mark, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Mark cut him off. You betrayed me. Both of you. I felt a strange calm as I watched their carefully constructed deception collapse. The weeks of private investigation, the sleepless nights piecing together timelines and evidence. It had all led to this moment. Claire stepped forward, glass crunching beneath her heels. How long? She asked David, her voice barely audible. When he didn't answer, Vanessa laughed bitterly. 7 years officially. 10 if you count when it started. He promised he'd leave you, you know. Every year another promise. Claire's composure cracked. The dignified surgeon's wife, who served on 3 charity boards, crumpled into a nearby chair. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, I told her quietly. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Don't be. I've suspected something for years. Just not this. My mother-in-law approached Vanessa with surprising steadiness. You need to leave our family alone now. Permanently. Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. This isn't over, she hissed as she gathered her purse. That money was supporting your grandson, whether you like how it happened or not. We'll discuss proper arrangements for the child, Mark's father said firmly. But not with you and not today. Leave now before I call security. After Vanessa stormed out, the silence felt physical, pressing against us from all sides. Blue balloons still bobbed gently against the ceiling. A banner reading "Welcome Baby Matthews" hung mockingly above the fireplace. Mark turned to me, his face a complex landscape of gratitude and devastation. How long have you known? Long enough to be certain, I answered, placing his hand on my belly where our daughter kicked, as if sensing the tension. Long enough to protect what's ours. In the shattered remains of our celebration, surrounded by broken glass and broken trust, I felt our baby move again. Whatever came next, the confrontations, the legal battles, the family healing, would be fought on my terms now. The silent war had finally gone public. The aftermath of the baby shower lingered in our home like a ghost. Mark spent that night in his study, documents spread across his desk, comparing years of child support statements with the paternity results I'd uncovered. I kept my distance, giving him space to process what even I was still struggling to comprehend. It had started 6 months earlier with a medical bill. Not even something significant, just a routine pediatric checkup statement that had been forwarded to our address by mistake. The patient name listed was Tyler Stevens, Vanessa's son, but the insurance information had been altered. Someone had used Mark's policy information, but the billing address had been crossed out and corrected by hand. I need to know how long this has been happening, Mark said when he finally emerged from his study at dawn, eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. How did you even begin to figure this out? I led him to our home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a box containing everything I'd gathered during my investigation. After I found that bill, I hired James Patterson. Mark raised his eyebrows. The private investigator? The one who helped with the Westlake account? I nodded. I needed someone discreet. Someone who owed me a favor. I'd helped Patterson's daughter secure a scholarship 3 years ago. He'd promised to return the kindness someday. James followed Vanessa for 3 weeks. That's when he discovered her regular meetings with David, I explained, spreading surveillance photos across the desk. Coffee shops, parks, once at a hotel in Cambridge. Mark's hands trembled as he picked up a photo showing his brother and ex-girlfriend sitting close together in a corner booth, David's hand covering Vanessa's. Then I found the emails, I continued. And after that, the financial records. The trust fund had been established when Tyler was born. A generous arrangement set up by George and Diana Matthews to support their supposed grandchild. Mark had been adding to it faithfully for 7 years, believing he was doing right by a child he rarely saw but felt responsible for. They played me for a fool, Mark whispered. They played all of us, I corrected gently. The next morning my phone rang. It was Claire. Can we meet? Her voice sounded different, harder somehow. Just us. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Cambridge, far from the social circles that might recognize us. Claire arrived wearing large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. She ordered tea she didn't drink and sat with perfect posture. I suspected David was unfaithful, she admitted after long minutes of silence. But I never imagined it was Vanessa, or that there was a child. Her composure cracked slightly. 7 years of lies. Why did you stay silent if you suspected something? I asked carefully. Claire removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes swollen from crying. Do you know what it means to be a Matthews in Boston medical circles? David's father pioneered cardiac procedures that changed the field. The Matthews name opens doors, secures grants, builds wings of hospitals. So it was about reputation. It was about survival, she corrected. My career as a pediatric surgeon would have been over if I'd accused David without proof. The Matthews closed ranks around their own. Not this time, I said firmly. This time they'll have to face the truth. Later that week, while reviewing financial documents James had obtained, I discovered something disturbing. Vanessa had recently applied for a substantial loan using her connection to the Matthews family as collateral. The timing matched perfectly with her discovery of my pregnancy. She was getting desperate, I told Mark that evening. Her interior design business is failing. According to these statements, she's nearly bankrupt. Mark looked up from his laptop. She must have realized that once our baby was born, her leverage would diminish. The family's attention and resources would shift. Exactly. The baby shower wasn't a spontaneous ambush. It was calculated, her last chance to secure her position before our daughter arrives. I showed him the loan application, dated just weeks after my pregnancy announcement in the Boston Globe Society pages. She was planning this for months. The most difficult step came next, dinner with Mark's parents. George and Diana Matthews had built a dynasty in Boston. He through medicine, she through social connections and charity work. Their Beacon Street home intimidated even the city's elite. Are you sure we should tell them everything? Mark asked as we stood on their doorstep. Dad's heart condition. I squeezed his hand. Partial truth is still a lie. They deserve to know what their money has been supporting. Diana greeted us with brittle cheer, pretending the baby shower incident hadn't happened. George offered drinks with mechanical politeness. The tension stretched across the formal dining room like a wire about to snap. I assume you've come to explain Saturday's unpleasantness, Diana finally said over soup. We've come because you deserve the truth, I replied. For the next hour we laid out the evidence, gently but thoroughly. I watched George's face grow paler with each revelation, noted how Diana's hand trembled as she reached repeatedly for her water glass. The trust fund you established for Tyler, Mark explained, has been supporting David's child all along. He and Vanessa have been. That's enough, George interrupted, pressing a hand to his chest. I don't need the sordid details. Diana stood abruptly. I need my medication, she murmured, leaving the room. Dad, are you all right? Mark moved toward his father, medical training kicking in as he checked George's pulse. 7 years, George whispered. 7 years I believed that boy was my grandson. He is your grandson, I said firmly. Just not Mark's son. The relationship hasn't changed, only the truth about it. George looked at me with new respect. You investigated all this while pregnant, planning a baby shower, running your department? I nodded. Diana won't take this well, he warned. She's been fragile since her last episode. I thought of my mother-in-law's nervous exhaustion last year, the family's polite term for her breakdown after a social humiliation. This would be exponentially worse. Diana returned, composed but distant. What happens now? She asked, voice hollow. Now we protect the family, I said. The real family. As we left that night, Diana took my hand unexpectedly. You should know, she whispered. David has always been George's favorite. Since childhood. It's complicated their judgment over the years. Her words echoed in my mind during our silent drive home. Another layer of the Matthews family dynamics revealed. One that might prove crucial in what was to come. That night, as Mark finally slept peacefully beside me, I reviewed what we'd learned and what remained hidden. The threads were unraveling, exposing a tapestry of deception more complex than I'd initially imagined. But with each revelation I became more certain. This wasn't just about protecting our baby anymore. This was about justice long overdue. Diana's words about George's favoritism toward David haunted me for days. It explained so much. The blind eye turned to David's indiscretions over the years, the immediate trust fund established without verification, the way Mark always seemed to work twice as hard for half the recognition. We need to talk to David directly, I told Mark over breakfast a week after the dinner with his parents. Alone, without Vanessa or Claire. I want to hear him admit it. Mark shook his head. He'll just deny everything. He hasn't returned my calls since the shower. He'll talk to me, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm still the hormonal pregnant lady who might stress out his parents if not appeased. I texted David suggesting we meet at his office after hours. Neutral territory with the privacy we needed. To my surprise, he agreed almost immediately. Boston Medical Center's cardiac wing was nearly deserted when I arrived that evening. David's office door was open, his silhouette visible against the window overlooking the city lights. I pressed record on my phone before entering. Emma. He greeted me without turning around. I assume you've come to negotiate. Is that what you think this is? A business transaction? I closed the door behind me. Isn't everything? He finally faced me, looking remarkably like Mark but with harder eyes. You want something. I want something. Let's not pretend this is about feelings. I settled into the chair across from his desk, resting my hands protectively over my bump. What exactly do you think I want, David? Silence. Discretion. A clean family image for your child to inherit. He leaned forward. The Matthews name still means something in this city, despite your little performance at the baby shower. I smiled. Actually, I came for the truth. On record. His eyes flickered to my phone on the desk between us. Recording without consent is illegal in Massachusetts. Good thing I worked in corporate law before marketing then. One-party consent is perfectly legal when gathering evidence of fraud. I lied smoothly. In truth, Massachusetts was a two-party consent state, but I suspected David didn't know that. How long were you sleeping with Vanessa before she broke up with Mark? Something shifted in his expression. Calculating, measuring options. Does it matter now? It matters to the timeline. It matters to the trust fund that Mark's been paying into for 7 years based on fraudulent claims. David's laugh lacked any warmth. You really want the ugly version? Fine. Vanessa and I met at a hospital fundraiser while she was with Mark. We had an immediate connection. While she was living with your brother, I clarified. While my brother was working 120-hour weeks and barely acknowledging her existence, he countered. The affair lasted 3 months before she got pregnant. She tried to make it work with Mark, hoping the baby was his. But when Tyler was born, you knew. David nodded slowly. The timing, certain genetic traits. We knew. But Mark was established by then, finishing his residency while I was still struggling. It made sense. To lie. To defraud your own brother. To provide for my son through the family resources he was entitled to, David corrected sharply. My practice wasn't successful yet. Claire would have left me if she'd found out. I made Vanessa a promise. Once I was established, once Tyler was older, we'd figure something out. 7 years of promises, I noted. Meanwhile, Vanessa's business is failing. You've been supporting her secretly, but it's not enough anymore, is it? His composure slipped slightly. Her financial troubles are her own making. Poor investments, overextending on projects. And expecting you to bail her out each time, I finished. Until you couldn't anymore and she panicked. That's why she came to the shower. A desperate move to secure more money before my baby arrived and change the family dynamics. David's silence confirmed my theory. What I don't understand, I continued, is why you'd risk everything. Your marriage, your reputation, your relationship with your brother. You don't understand because you don't know what it's like to be the second son in this family, he interrupted, bitterness breaking through. Mark was always first choice for everything, first in our parents' consideration, first in line for opportunities. I built my life taking whatever was left. I studied his face, seeing the years of resentment etched in lines around his eyes. Even Vanessa? I asked quietly. Especially Vanessa, he admitted. She was the first thing I didn't inherit from Mark's leftovers. She chose me. The confession hung in the air between us. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. There's something else you should know, I said. I hired a private investigator. He followed the money trail from your accounts. David stiffened. What are you talking about? Monthly payments to a Sarah Lindstrom in Providence. Rent for an apartment, private school tuition for a 4-year-old girl. I watched the color drain from his face. Another child, David? Another family. That's not, he started then stopped. Sarah is complicated. So complicated that Claire doesn't know about her either? Or your daughter? I pressed. How many secret families are you juggling? David buried his face in his hands. What do you want from me, Emma? I want you to come clean. To everyone. Mark, Claire, your parents, even Vanessa. No more lies, no more manipulation. That would destroy everything. The truth usually does, I replied. But what comes after might be better. 2 days later, I invited everyone to our home. Mark's parents, Claire, David, and Vanessa. They arrived separately, tension crackling between them like static electricity. No one knew why they'd been summoned except Mark, who stood supportively by my side. Thank you all for coming, I began once everyone was seated in our living room. I know this is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. I placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside are documents that affect everyone in this room. Financial records, text messages, medical files. Evidence of a deception that spans nearly a decade. Emma, please, Diana interrupted, voice strained. George's health is exactly why this needs to be resolved now, Diana, I said gently. The stress of secrets is more damaging than the truth. Over the next hour, I methodically presented everything. The affair that began before Vanessa left Mark, the paternity of Tyler, the years of financial deception, and finally, the revelation about Sarah and the second child in Providence. Claire gasped at this last disclosure. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with fury. She hadn't known about Sarah either. Is this true? Claire asked David, her voice remarkably steady. David couldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated. Actually, it's remarkably simple, Claire replied, rising to her feet. You're a pathological liar who's been manipulating everyone in this room. To everyone's surprise, she walked over and sat beside me. I want to see everything you've found, she said. All of it. That moment, when Claire chose alliance over animosity, changed everything. I'd expected her to hate me as the messenger, to side with her husband out of self-preservation. Instead, she recognized we'd both been pawns in the same game. George finally spoke, his authoritative voice silencing the room. David, you will make this right. All of it. Or you will no longer be welcome in this family. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in David's eyes. His father's approval had been his North Star, the thing he'd fought for his entire life. As everyone left that evening, Claire lingered behind. How did you do it? She asked. Stay so calm, so methodical through all of this? I considered her question carefully. I had something worth fighting for, I answered, glancing toward Mark, who was seeing his parents out. And I learned long ago that justice doesn't have to be loud to be effective. She nodded slowly. We should talk again. I think we might be stronger together than apart in what's coming. I watched her walk away, this woman I'd considered a peripheral character in my life just weeks ago. Now we were unlikely allies in a battle neither of us had chosen. The architect of justice sometimes builds unexpected doorways. I designed this confrontation to expose truth and protect my family. I hadn't anticipated it would create new connections from the broken pieces. But that's the thing about truth. Once released, it builds its own path forward. The spring flowers were blooming when Catherine Elizabeth Matthews made her entrance into the world after 16 hours of labor. She arrived with a full head of dark hair and eyes that revealed the unmistakable Matthews blue. Mark wept when he held her, a mixture of joy and lingering grief over all that had transpired. "She's perfect," he whispered, touching her tiny fingers. Completely untouched by all of this. In the 6 months since our family confrontation, the landscape of our lives had shifted dramatically. David had moved out of the home he shared with Claire, renting a small apartment near the hospital. His medical practice sustained damage when rumors of the scandal reached his patients. Nothing explicit, but Boston's elite social circles functioned through whispers and innuendo. Enough to send several high-profile patients seeking care elsewhere. Vanessa had been forced to close her design business after losing her last major clients. The financial investigation revealed years of creative accounting that bordered on fraud. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The deception she'd maintained in her personal life had mirrored her business practices. One unexpected development came 3 weeks after Catherine's birth, when Mark received a text message from Vanessa. "Tyler keeps asking about you," it read. "He misses his uncle." Mark showed me the message, conflict evident in his expression. "What do I do? He's still my nephew, but everything feels different now." I adjusted Catherine in my arms, studying her peaceful face. "Children shouldn't pay for adult mistakes. If you want to see him, we'll find a way that works." 2 days later, Mark met Tyler at a playground in neutral territory. I watched from a distance as the 7-year-old boy ran excitedly toward the man he'd always known as his uncle, not his father. Mark later told me he'd struggled not to see David in the boy's features, now that he knew the truth. "He asked why I stopped coming over," Mark said that night, his voice thick with emotion. "I told him grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, but it doesn't change how we feel about the kids in our lives." The legal and financial untangling proved messier than the emotional one. George Matthews hired the family's longtime attorney to reorganize the trust funds, establishing separate accounts for Tyler, Catherine, and, after DNA confirmation, Ellie, David's daughter in Providence. The process required forensic accountants to trace years of transactions and determine what funds had been obtained through fraudulent claims. Claire and I met weekly for coffee, forging an unexpected friendship through shared betrayal. She'd filed for divorce but was proceeding carefully to protect her own medical career and reputation. "I always thought if this happened, I'd be devastated beyond function," she admitted during one of our meetings. "But it's strangely liberating to finally have confirmation after years of suspicion." "Do you think you can forgive him?" I asked. Her laugh held no humor. "Never. But I can rebuild something better without him." She hesitated, stirring her latte. "Sarah contacted me, you know. David's other woman. She wanted to apologize." "What did you say?" "I told her we should meet. Compare notes." Claire's eyes met mine. 3 women, 3 different lives, all damaged by the same man. There's power in that alliance. While externally our lives seemed to be finding new equilibrium, internally I struggled with conflicting emotions. The satisfaction of exposing the truth sometimes gave way to crushing guilt when I considered the collateral damage, especially to the children. Tyler and Ellie would grow up with the burden of their father's deceptions. Catherine would eventually learn how her family had fractured before her birth. Had justice been worth the price? I questioned myself during sleepless nights, rocking Catherine while Mark slept. Had my need for truth and vindication caused more harm than healing? These doubts intensified when an unexpected revelation emerged during the financial investigation. The forensic accountant discovered an anomaly in the trust paperwork. George Matthews' signature on an amendment dated shortly after Tyler's birth, acknowledging special circumstances regarding the child's paternity. "He knew," Mark said flatly when we reviewed the document together. "Dad knew Tyler wasn't mine. He protected David anyway." The betrayal cut Mark deeply. This confirmation of his second-place status in his father's affections. When confronted, George initially denied knowledge, then admitted he'd had suspicions based on timing and certain physical traits. "I thought it best for everyone if we just moved forward," he defended weakly. "The child needed support. The family needed stability. The family needed truth," Mark countered. You chose David's comfort over my right to know. This final layer of deception nearly broke Mark's relationship with his father. For weeks he refused to bring Catherine to their regular Sunday dinners, despite Diana's pleading phone calls. The rift seemed insurmountable, until Catherine's christening approached. They're still her grandparents, I reminded Mark gently. Whatever their failures, do we want to deprive her of that relationship? How do we move forward knowing what we know? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. With clear eyes and boundaries, I answered. We rebuild on truth, not comfort. The christening became our first full family gathering since the confrontation. Everyone attended, George and Diana, Claire, who'd agreed to be Catherine's godmother. Even David at Mark's reluctant invitation. Vanessa came with Tyler, staying separate from David in a silent acknowledgement of their permanently altered relationship. After the ceremony, I found myself alone with George on the church steps. He looked older, diminished by the events of the past year. I made terrible mistakes, he said without preamble. Protecting David became habit over the years. I convinced myself it was for the family's good. It's not my forgiveness you need, I replied. He nodded slowly. Mark may never fully trust me again. I understand that. But I want you to know I see what you did. How you handled this. It was remarkable. I watched the scattered family members below us. Mark showing Tyler how to gently hold the baby, Claire engaged in surprisingly civil conversation with Diana, David standing awkwardly alone at the periphery. All the broken pieces attempting to form new configurations. The revenge wasn't in exposing the lies, I told George quietly. It's in what we build now. Catherine will grow up in a family founded on truth, however uncomfortable. That's my victory. Later that evening, as guests departed our home, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa watching Mark with Catherine. For a moment, her expression revealed naked regret, not for the schemes or the money, but for the authentic family connection she'd sacrificed for convenience and advantage. I approached her carefully, Catherine in my arms. Would you like to hold her before you go? Surprise flickered across her face, then caution. Are you sure? She's going to know her cousin. You'll be in her life one way or another. We might as well start somewhere. As I placed Catherine in her arms, our eyes met with perfect understanding. The war was over. The battlefield would always show scars, but new growth had already begun pushing through the damaged earth. Sometimes justice requires destruction before reconstruction can begin. The family would never return to what it was, but perhaps what emerged would be stronger, built on a foundation of hard-won honesty rather than comfortable lies. Catherine would inherit that legacy, not the toxic secretive one that came before. In that, I had achieved the most complete revenge possible. Not destroying my enemies but transforming the very system that allowed their deception to flourish.